We're here with Minneapolis's own Weaver at the Loom. How's it going, man?
It's going great. How are you?
Doing very well, very well. Your new album, Before Now Was Then, is out now. We've been playing Encyclopedia off of it, and you've been playing some shows. What have you been up to?
That is fantastic.
Yeah. So what's been going on?
Nothing. Just getting ready to go out on the road in May. Going to do about 6 weeks and going to try to play as many shows as possible, coming through, well, hopefully everywhere, Midwest, East Coast, through the South, and the West Coast, and then coming back home. So pressing some vinyls and CDs and T-shirts and all of that. It's a ton of work. I do everything independent DIY style, so definitely keeping busy.
What got you into the whole music thing?
I mean, I guess no different than most people. Just, had a friend who played guitar, thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. So, I had to do it and started playing guitar, and then I started singing and writing songs, and the next logical step was starting a band, and it just kind of all avalanched from there. And, now we're here and trying to do it as a living.
You've talked a lot about your music being kind of contemplative and I don't want to use the word spacey, but it definitely is. It's not your standard typical rock music for those who are listening that haven't heard it. Talk a little bit about it, because it is you have a very, very interesting sound.
Thank you. I guess, growing up, I was always attracted to kind of, usually it ended up being the last track on every record, which is usually I don't want to overuse the catchword epic, but I guess that's probably the appropriate description. But I just always gravitated towards that kind of very drawn out, dynamic, just, huge sound. And then, when I got, probably into high school, college, I started realizing that there was like a whole demographic of people who just made that type of music. I found bands like Explosion in the Sky, Mogwai, Sigur Rós especially, and that just kind of blew my mind. And it just always felt right. And my favorite band of all time is Radiohead. I think Thom Yorke and Johnny Greenwood are absolutely geniuses. I think it's like the new jazz, basically.
Right.
And I don't know, something just always resonated with me about that type of sound. And I guess music has always been about honesty for me. I guess like the records that I like the most are the ones that I just feel I can connect to on a very primal, basic level. And I've always just connected to that sound on that same level. It just always felt right. And I guess that's why anyone hopefully that's why anyone writes the music they do, is just because that's how they connect to it. That's what they connect most to. And it just feels right. I don't know. That's just kind of how I hear music, and that's what comes out. Yeah. That's probably the best I can describe it.
Is it daunting to have to kind of, or not to have to, but to be into this type of music with it being so large and kind of soundscapey? Is it hard to sit down with a single instrument and to kind of put yourself into that mindset? Or, where do the songs come from?
I usually do start them very simply on, acoustic guitar or piano, and then gradually flesh them out. They usually look way, way different than they originally did, but the kind of the core is there, the kind of core idea. Because, even though it is very ambient and there's a lot of soundscapes going on, I try to make sure that there is like a very strong song structure there. I try not to, even though maybe some of the layers and some of the tones are not so typical, I try to keep some of the classic elements there and have it not be too linear or too out there. I think there are timeless things of music, and I definitely want to have that kind of timeless structure and timeless elements in there. And so that helps provide kind of a skeleton, but it is very like there's a core skeleton, and then there's just a whole lot of very insubstantial layering going on that kind of fleshes out the whole skeleton. And at times, there might be a whole track of, one instrument playing, two notes over and over with a ton of reverb and delay, and then I reverse it, and then I run it through this and run it through that. And And at times it can be like, it's almost hard to think that simply sometimes. You usually find yourself writing a part and you overplay. You have too many notes, too much going on. I try to, create different depths and textures that will hopefully accent the melody, which is the most important part of the song, and whatever helps that to pop. And a lot of times, honestly, I will have a session, like a recording session, maybe 70 tracks, and I'll just listen to it all and I'll just start trimming. I'll just, cut away tracks, which is kind of a weird feeling because you spent a lot of time on that, but you just have to keep in mind whatever's best for the song, and if whatever part you wrote is fighting it and not adding to it, let it go. I've had times where I've had full drums, full guitars, all this stuff, kind of like a more rock style song that I've been like, you know what, this is kind of like a really mellow piano type song, or a really stripped down. That's just how the melody works best. The melody doesn't work best at full dynamic the whole time. And even though you put in hours and hours on that stuff, you just cut it because that's the best thing for the song. And those are scary decisions to make, but hopefully, the right ones in the end. It's easy to get lost, though.
Yeah.
Definitely it's easy to get lost. Especially I do almost everything myself. I usually hire out a drummer, but everything else I play myself. So you get a little schizophrenic, and you have to kind of step outside and be your own editor, which is an interesting dynamic, I guess.
Yeah, have you had instances where they've gotten away from you, or maybe they've gone in a direction that you didn't originally plan on them going?
Yeah, for sure. And that's actually, when you write by yourself, you kind of have to let that happen, because that provides kind of a new energy. I think a lot of the reason that bands that stay together and have a core lineup, for records and records and records, they develop such a cool sound because they're like telepathic. They can just like read each other's minds, and they feed off this energy that they all have. And I think that you have to find a way to recreate that when you're writing, kind of like alone. And you kind of have to let your subconscious be your own, almost like your other band member, and just kind of, because hopefully if the song does go off in a different direction that maybe your more type A side had originally planned for, that you're like, oh, I don't know how I got here, but I'm loving this, because it creates a new energy. It's a spark. It's spontaneous, kind of impromptu, and those are really important elements to music. That's what performance and writing is all about, is just capturing that moment. But sometimes you end up and you're like, how did I get here? Or you're like, I've taken this song 12 different places and it's still not happening, and then it's time to just hit delete, or put it in the didn't work folder. And that's just music. Sometimes that happens. That's why you have B-sides records, and that's why you have for every B-side there's probably another track that no one will ever hear.
Well, we're here with Dan, also known as Weaver at the Loom. We're going to play a track in case you guys are listening and have never heard before. This is Encyclopedia.
On the earth, where do I serve? When we depart from end to start, I'm in reverse. I wanna lose control, let my body go, turn to cold bioelectric ball. Take flight, finally finding notes that subdivide such height in which your world resides. This noise is chemical. We interact, then just react. Neurological. Oh, make my body move, lost into the groove, become my own dialectic drum. Take flight, finally finding notes that subdivide such height
And that was Encyclopedia by Weaver at the Loom. We're here with Dan. That was off his newest album, Before Now Was Then. You can catch it on iTunes. And you're doing a merch giveaway on Facebook right now, is that correct?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, basically it's anyone who, plugs me on Facebook or Twitter or radio. Basically any type of promotion, just send me an email, let me know what you did, and I will basically enter your name in a raffle, and I'm giving away CDs and 12-inch vinyls and even some test vinyl pressings from the vinyl pressing. There's only 6 of those ever made, and I'm giving away 3 of them. So
awesome.
Just trying to give back a little bit.
Well, before we went into Encyclopedia, we were talking about the process of writing and recording music, the way that you do it, being a solo artist. Does the doing the whole recording process by yourself, does it get frustrating, the technical aspect of it, having to go back and forth between playing and recording and producing, and does it get a little frustrating?
I think it can be until you use the recording like an instrument. If that makes any sense. Instead of viewing them as 2 different, spheres and just dealing with the fact that one is more technical than the other, I try to use the recording aspect as an instrument, and I try to view it as playing it, because there are certain things that you can do recording wise that you just can't do in a straight performance. And I'm not talking about like over editing or anything like that, but there are different ways, and the more you get into recording and engineering, you'll understand that you can actually use recording as a device to create different sounds that you might not be able to create just the first pass through. I just view it as another dimension, another level of creativity. And for me, I get really inspired by that. I think it really helps to add texture and complexity to the records. I love Brian Eno. I think that he is a genius producer. And I mean, I heard him one time talk about like how a lot of like Oriental rugs use an unbelievable amount of different hues and tones in the actual thread count, and the different hues and tones they use is really complex. And he said that he likes to make his records like that, and every different sound is a different color, and just have so many different layers and textures.
You can definitely hear it.
Yeah, and I take
it.
a lot of inspiration from that, because I think it just adds such a depth to it, and I think that it adds longevity to the record, because I think that sometimes, I like pop records as much as anyone else does, but I also love records that maybe you're not, like when I first started listening to Radiohead, I was like, this is really cool, but I didn't like naturally latch onto it, like you would the first time you hear like Led Zeppelin or like the Beatles or something like that. It was a little more complex, and I was like, I'm going to need to listen to this record 10 times before I really get it.
You definitely understand, and I can tell from things that I've read and talking to you, what we have over the past couple of days, you know what you're going for, and you definitely have a focus as far as a general atmosphere and a general feeling. We've talked about that musically. What about lyrically? What about from a conceptual literature standpoint?
I was a philosophy and lit major. I got my bachelor's in philosophy and lit, and I definitely love words, and I definitely think that part of the reason that music is as powerful as it is because it's language, just like talking is. It's communication, and that's one of the most basic concepts between people, is communicating one idea, from yourself to another person and a group of people. And I definitely think that lyrics are a huge part, and I view it like a tone. There are certain genres of music, I think, that cater towards lyrics differently. Obviously, you have folk, which is very lyric oriented, and you can pack a ton of words into folk music, which is like, look at Bob Dylan, and you look at, like one of his lyric sheets, and it's like, obviously he's a genius. I love Bob Dylan. I'm like a cult follower of him, but
not all of us can get away with having 9 verses.
Right, and that's the thing. Depending on what you're doing, you're probably going to have a paragraph. So it's like you have to fit a very concise thought into maybe 5 sentences, and then a couple of those are going to repeat, you know?
Yeah.
So I definitely try to bite off very small moments for each song, and something could be as simple as just one thought, or like reflecting on one moment that you kind of are like, this is a great moment. I'm gonna tuck this away, and I need to expand on this later. And I also try to have the words and just kind of their connotations and the emotions that they kind of reflect match, you know, the kind of feeling of the song. I also try not to bury it too much. I don't try to give it away, but I think there's a happy medium between maybe trying too hard to be, I think sometimes people try to like maybe use too complex of language to try and wow people rather than, and you kind of sacrifice the listener at that point. Right. I mean, you can only be so obscure before people just can't get inside of your brain anymore. And it doesn't come down to them being intelligent enough to understand the language. It's about them not having access to the inner workings of your mind. And the goal, I think, of good lyrics is to take the innermost part of your mind and present it in a way that a lot of people can understand it. Don't dumb it down, but provide it in a simple, comprehensible, elegant way that most people will grasp. And I mean, that's a lot easier said than done. I also think that to a certain extent, the beauty of, you know, music and the fact that it's not done in a vacuum. You have people who listen to it. I don't necessarily want my meaning to be the meaning. You know, I love when I hear people say, hey, I think this song is about this. And I'm like, I would have never thought that. And that's awesome, because that just adds to it, you know, because I'm like, oh, I totally see how you got there. That's great. And that's the beauty of words, is that they have so many different dimensions to them that you can put a string of, you know, of words together thinking it means this, and someone else might, you know, read that and apply maybe their own life or context to it and come out with a completely different answer. Right. And I think that's great. I think that gives life to, you know, to the lyrics and to the song. But it's tough because you really don't have a lot of room to work. Yeah. One of the people that I grew up listening to was singer-songwriter Pete Yorn. Yeah. And he's a perfect example of what you're talking about, as far as his lyrics are so complex and esoteric that I have no clue what he's talking about 90% of the time, but I have what I think the songs mean. Right, and I think that's awesome. I think, well, and I mean, take Bob Dylan. I mean, they'd always want him to take responsibility for what he was saying, and he would just say, no, I'm just a storyteller. Right. You know, like, I am not these works. I just pen them into existence, and they become what they are. Like, how you reacted to the song is the song. I just put it out there. And I think that's when music transcends to that next level and goes from just being a design and how well it was designed to all of a sudden becoming alive. Right. You know, it's like the ghost in the machine. I think if that stuff starts happening, that's a good sign, you know, for that record or for those songs. Well, we are here with Weaver at the Loom. Been spending a little time talking about music and all the good things about it. The album Before Now Was Then is out now. You can find it, as well as the last release I was searching and I found, both on iTunes. Hit them up on Facebook because you'll have a chance to win some cool stuff. And Dan, thanks for talking with us, man. Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah. Really great. If you're listening right now and you've never heard Weaver at the Loom, you didn't get to hear Encyclopedia, which we just played, go out, find it. It's unbelievable. If you're fans of Radiohead, Sigur Rós, it's ambient music, but it's not boring. That's excellent. Thanks for talking with us, man. Oh, thanks for having me.